Hello, I'm Wink Starrett. This is number 0848, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0848. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet John Bacon, who is an award-winning journalist and the author of The Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Despite having grown up in and around the Great Lakes, there were some things about the dangers of the water that even he didn't know before he started his research.
I must confess, despite having swam in all 5 Great Lakes and sailed on a couple of them and boated on a few more, 95% of what's in this book I did not know 4 years ago. I'm surrounded by the Great Lakes. I'm surrounded by Great Lakes shipping. I did not know, for example, when you talk to experienced commercial sailors who've done 10 or 15 years in the Atlantic and 20 or 30 on the Great Lakes, they say the Great Lakes are more dangerous than the Atlantic, and it's not even close. And the salty captains, the ocean captains, used to just laugh at us until they see the waves, then they shut up and go looking for safe harbor.
Seth Voorhees is the author of the post-apocalyptic suspense novel called Immune. While it does involve zombies, how does this story differ from ones that came before it?
Well, for one, the coming out of the zombie phase and remembering everything that happened to them and how society had treated them, and they get all their faculties back and being able to rebuild society in I wouldn't say a better image. They still are human and they get kind of caught up in, prejudice and revenge and all of that. But I think just getting past the normal pandemic narrative of just everyone dies. Like that's most pandemic narratives is, you're just focusing more on the horrors of everyone dying, where I take it a step further and there's a lot of just building afterwards and what happens to the society.
Stuart Nulman is in with another edition of Book Banter.
Hi, I'm Stuart Nulman, and Book Banter looks back on the life of the late, great John Candy with a new biography by Paul Myers. Want to find out how to be a Mog and become your own best friend? Stay tuned later to the Stuff File program.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0848, was Wink Starrett, a broadcaster and the morning man at radio station KMBZ in Kansas City. Thank you very much, Wink, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Target has implemented a new customer service initiative called the 10-4 program that mandates employees smile at shoppers. Under the policy, workers must smile, make eye contact, and wave or greet customers within 10 feet. When shoppers come within 4 feet, employees must ask if they need help or inquire about their day.
I'm using my Target Circle today.
Yes, that's the best news I've heard since this morning.
Oh, what happened this morning?
Actually, it's private.
Target research, or should I say Target, indicates consumer metrics improved when customers received greetings or acknowledgement. The program mirrors Walmart's long-standing 10-foot smiling requirement for workers. This customer service push follows Target's recent corporate layoffs last month, marking the company's first major workforce reduction in a decade. The cuts came after CEO Brian Cornell's resignation amid declining sales and profits. Jeez, forced to smile and wave and make small talk like their Stepford wives just after corporate layoffs. That must be comforting for the employees.
You want to know what comforts me?
Actually, I'm in a little bit of a hurry.
A red circle with a white circle in the middle of that and a red dot in the middle of that.
Like the Target.
I just realized the Target logo is a target.
Oh, yes, the employees are all targets now. 3 New Jersey men have turned themselves in for allegedly stealing 200 stuffed animals and causing $57,000 in damage at Playland Amusement Park in Rye, New York. Police say 20-year-old Connor Ivancho and 19-year-olds Daniel Bracco and Anthony Conkling arrived by rowboat during the overnight hours of September 23rd and climbed a fence to enter the seasonal park featured in the 1988 Tom Hanks film Big.
Make my wish right. I wish I were big.
Authorities report they vandalized an electrical room by cutting fiber optic cables, stole stuffed animals in garbage bags, and tried unsuccessfully to throw a photo booth off the boardwalk. All 3 face felony charges of burglary and criminal mischief plus misdemeanor trespassing and larceny. Not only do they have to face the wrath of the judge, they also have to face Zoltar. Speaking of the movie Big and wanting to be an adult as a child, I actually drove a city bus when I was 10. It was only about 10 to 15 feet, but I was stoked. And yes, I have a picture of it. That story reminds me of this next story, although it's with an adult. A 36-year-old homeless man stole a Hamilton, Ontario city bus one night and drove passengers around for 15 minutes before police arrested him. The incident began around 9 p.m. when the driver left for a break at downtown McNabb bus terminal. The man took the driver's seat of the articulated bus and headed to the mountain, making regular stops for about 10 passengers to board and exit. Police spokesperson Trevor McKenna said passengers initially didn't realize he wasn't the actual driver until he made wrong turns. One passenger even gave him directions back to the route. Said McKenna, "There was not a ding on the bus. He did a great job. It's comical, but at the same time, it's serious. We're thankful nobody was hurt." Police followed without sirens to avoid escalating the situation. The man faces charges including theft over $5,000 and driving while prohibited. Yeah, he's also going to have to deal with Zoltar. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, a Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization investigator, and who knew that was a job, called an eyewitness account from central Pennsylvania sincere and credible. The witness, a retired civil engineer and Air Force veteran, reported seeing a dark figure cross Interstate 80 around 5:30 p.m. on October the 4th near mile marker 169. Traveling 150 yards behind another vehicle, he watched the human-like creature appear to stand over the car ahead, and the witness said, "What the hell is he doing? He's going to get hit." The figure crossed all highway lanes in 3 seconds with smooth, gliding movements before disappearing into the woods without climbing the guardrail. 2 additional witnesses reported sightings that day. One hunter with over 50 years' experience stated, "I just want to add I know what I saw, but I don't know what I saw. This was not a bear." You know, it's this kind of sighting that would make Dr. Wallace Wrightwood in Harry and the Hendersons believe much, much faster.
You're good people. I'm going to say this once. I'm going to say it simple, and I hope to God, for your sakes, you all listen. There are no abominable snowmen. There are no Sasquatches. There are no big feet.
By the way, is the plural big feet or Bigfoots? Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Award-winning journalist John Bacon is the author of a book that tells the story of a tragic event that happened back on November 10th, 1975. It's entitled The Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. John joins us from Ann Arbor, Michigan via Riverside.com. Hi, John.
Hello, Peter.
Thanks for being on the program with us. Now, I first got into radio in the late 70s. And I got into music radio. And so I know the story based on the Gordon Lightfoot song. I mean, the legend lives on from the Chippewa on down of the big lake they call Gitchagumi. What brought you to this book?
Well, my mom is from New Brunswick, by the way. So how about that? A town called Milltown, now subsumed by St. Stephen, I believe. But anyway, but I grew up in Michigan. And of course, in Michigan, we are the Great Lakes state. We're surrounded by these ships. We don't know a lot about them, frankly, but of course, the song made an impact. Sort of the tragedy itself, we knew about that right away around here. But the song, you cannot escape it, Peter, that without the song, there is no book. Believe it or not, there were 6,000 commercial shipwrecks on the Great Lakes from 1875 to 1975. And everyone knows one, and it's because of the song.
What is it about the Edmund Fitzgerald? I mean, you can't get into the mind of a Gordon Lightfoot, but what is it that brought this to the forefront and to our consciousness when you say there are so many shipwrecks on the Great Lakes over the years?
Well, it's undeniably the song, like I said, but also the mystery of it. Unlike Titanic, they knew right away what the problem was, of course, and that's the iceberg. Then they couldn't find it for 83 years. This ship they found about 3 days after it went down, and we're still debating what happened because no one's exactly sure even now. My book, I think, strengthens certain theories and weakens others, but it's very hard to pin it down. So the mystery, I think, also attracts people to it. And how about this crazy stat? I already told you, Peter, that there were 6,000 shipwrecks between 1875 and 1975. Since this ship went down 50 years ago and 2 days, on November 10th, 1975, there have been 0 commercial shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. This has been the last one. So it's kind of like 9/11. It woke up the entire industry, got them out of their complacency, and there's been not one since, amazingly. And for me, it was the people. I got to 6 former crew members who'd been on the ship, obviously before it went down, because all 29 men went down with the ship. Those guys were great, including 2 who had been on that year, incredibly, and knew the captain, knew the crew, knew how the ship functioned. Then I also got to 14 of the 29 families who had, of course, loved ones on the ship. Then I also got to Rick Barthuli, the only surviving member that we know of, from November 10th, 1975, from the Arthur Anderson, which was chasing the Edmund Fitzgerald that night. The closest we can get to an eyewitness account of what it was like to be on the lake that night. So that's what drew me to this story.
Was it difficult in not only tracking down some of the families involved with the Edmund Fitzgerald sinking, but was it also difficult to get them to want to tell their side of the story?
Yeah, in many cases it was. They've never talked to a reporter before, as I said, so they were obviously keeping it to themselves for 45 plus years. But we gradually established trust. I told them that I will send them back their quotes before they go out to make sure I got them right, which very few journalists do, I think. And over time, it worked out, I think, very well in all accounts. And I just saw them 2 days ago at Whitefish Point for the 50th anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald sinking. And they loved the book, I'm pleased to report. So that took some time. Beyond that, I got to tell you, I just kept getting lucky. That once one family member thought I was okay, then I got Craig Elquist in Two Harbors, Minnesota, who'd been on the ship. I got to Patrick Devine, who'd been on the ship that summer. I got to the bass player and the drummer for Gordon Lightfoot's band, Rick Haynes and Barry Keane, respectively, who are still alive and still playing and told me great stories about the song itself. So I just kept getting lucky as far as the sources available to tell this story in a fresh way.
How did this story come to be in the first place for you? I mean, the 50th anniversary was recent. Were you writing the book with the intention of bringing light to it for the 50th anniversary, or was this something that had been percolating in your mind for a longer time than that?
Peter, how about both? Sorry about that answer. I grew up with this. It was always part of my consciousness. I always wanted to know more. But I pitched it to my agent 20 years ago, and my agent said no. And then 5 years ago, I've got a new agent, and my agent said yes, and so did the great W.W. Norton. They also did The Perfect Storm. So I got the right publisher as well. So I started working on this about 3.5, 4 years ago. And we obviously planning the book coming out on October 7th, which is a month before the anniversary.
And you said interviewed some of the guys who were involved in the song itself. What did you learn about the creation of that song that really just spurned the publicity for this travesty, this shipwreck?
Well, great question. I got to tell you, I'm not sure what is more unlikely, the creation of the song itself, as you're about to hear, or B, the success of the song, because neither one was a sure thing by any means. So Gordon Lightfoot is in his attic in Toronto on the night of Monday, November 10th, 1975. He's working on this sea shanty he had heard when he was 3.5 years old. It's the oldest song in his memory. So he's got some kind of melody. He's, obviously making it new. Not aware that the words are heading his way because the ship is going down as he's working. He's a very good sailor, by the way. He sailed to Port Huron, Michigan to Mackinac Island sail race. That's a 3-day sail race through Lake Huron. Knew what he's talking about. Got all the articles from 2 other guys I also found, Harry Atkins of Associated Press and Jim Gaines of Newsweek, both still alive, both still sharp, talking about their articles. 4 or 5 lines from Gaines' story in Newsweek got into Gordon Lightfoot's song. But nonetheless, he's very self-conscious about this for a lot of good reasons. Didn't want to seem as sensational or inaccurate or insensitive to any of the people. So he was not going to record it when they got together that March in a Toronto studio. They had 11 songs ready to go, and they had 5 days to record them, and this song was not one of them, amazingly. So they finished all 11 songs, got them polished and in the can, as they say, by Thursday afternoon. And they're literally packing up their instruments, ready to go home. And the producer, Ken Friesen, gets on the intercom and says, "Hey, Gordy, why don't you try that one song you've been screwing around with?" He says, "It's not ready." He says, "Well, look, I'm charging you for 5 days in the studio whether you use it or not. I'm here now, so is the band. Why not try it?" So he gets talked into it. He asks them to bring the lights down low. He's quiet for a minute. And then Barry Keane, the drummer, who's only 24 then, he says, "What do you want me to do?" He's never heard the song. So Gordy says, "I will nod at you when I want you to come in." Okay. So the song goes for a minute and a half, and he's still not nodded at Barry Keane. So Barry thinks he's forgotten all about him, and the song's about to end. Not this song. So at 1:34 exactly, Gordon Lightfoot looks at Barry Keane, gives him a nod, and he comes in with that famous drum fill. That's, sounds like the thunder and the lightning all coming down at once. It's wonderful. Then they go for 6.5 minutes, finish the song, and say, "You know what? That wasn't half bad. Let's try it again." They try it again, they try it again, they try it again. They come back the next day and try it 5 or 10 more times, and it was never as good. Incredibly, Peter, the song you hear on the radio to this day is not only a first take, it's the first time the band ever played it. The band had never heard it until that time. And I asked Barry Keane, how did that work? And he said, "Look, this is not a song that you think your way through. It's a song you have to feel. And if you feel it, the listeners will know it. And that's why that song works." So shockingly, it ended up being number 2 that year in the United States on the Billboard Top 100, behind only Rod Stewart's "Tonight's the Night" with his Swedish girlfriend Britt Eklund cooing in the background. That's 2.5 minutes. This song is a very unlikely hit. And to this day, it gets played more than almost any other song from 1976.
You said you grew up with the story of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, but when putting together this book, did you learn anything that caught you by surprise in doing the research for this book?
Peter, I must confess, despite having swam in all 5 Great Lakes and sailed on a couple of them and boated on a few more, 95% of what's in this book I did not know 4 years ago. So I'm surrounded by the Great Lakes. I'm surrounded by Great Lakes shipping. I did not know, for example, that when you talk to experienced commercial sailors who've done 10 or 15 years in the Atlantic and 20 or 30 on the Great Lakes, they say the Great Lakes are more dangerous than the Atlantic, and it's not even close. And the salty captains, the ocean captains, used to just laugh at us until they see the waves, then they shut up and go looking for safe harbor. The Great Lakes waves don't have salt in them, so they're sharper, pointier, they're closer together, they come at you faster, and the storms in the Great Lakes, unlike the ocean, which can be 500 or 1,000 miles away, and generate these nice soft roller coasters of waves. The storms on the Great Lakes are what's called locally occurring storms, which means, as one expert told me, it's right over your damn head. And a lot of your listeners will know that, of course. So These waves are not 10 to 16 seconds apart. It's 4 to 8 seconds apart, and they're more dangerous than ocean waves.
Now that 50 years has taken place, I'm assuming that there are. Well, I'm not just assuming. I know for a fact, having been in music radio for a long period of time, that there are people who think this is just a song, that this is not actual truth. Did you ever come across people like that?
Every day. I'm in the middle of a book tour. I've done 25 events in 10 states in 5 weeks. Every single day, someone will tell me, A, I thought it was fictitious, or B, I thought it was like it from the 1800s, some old lore. No, it's in our lifetimes for many of us, of course. Very much current and very much alive. And the people, the sons and the wives and the daughters, the wives are gone, but the sons and the daughters are still around, and I've talked to them. So no, this is very much a living story.
The book is called The Gales of November, The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. John, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Peter, my pleasure, and of course, plenty of Canadian content in this book, as you might imagine. And yes, as I told you before, I am half Canadian bacon. There's the joke. But you can find out more on johnnubacon.com, including how to order the book.
John Bacon, author of The Gales of November, The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. You can go to our website at thestuffall.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0848, and you'll find links to John's website, plus links to either amazon.com or amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
Did you hear about the guy giving away dead batteries? They were free of charge.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram.
I'm standing and fighting for Canada. Hi, this is Louise Penny. My books are mysteries I set in Canada. I love this country and there is no mystery why. I'm buying Canadian products to save Canadian jobs and protect Canadian businesses. That's a solution everybody can figure out. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Choosy mothers choose the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. If your mother didn't choose it for you, well, I guess she just doesn't love you.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to Seth Voorhees, who is the author of Immune. Plus, Stuart Nulman is in with another edition of Book Banter. We also have a morning shower thought and an idiot of the day, but I've got much more in Stuff File news right here, right now. A New York woman has filed a $5 million lawsuit against Post Consumer Brands, claiming her honeycomb cereal box contained fewer servings than advertised. The plaintiff alleges the family-size box had one serving less than the labeled 13 servings, calling the packaging false and misleading. The woman claims she was deprived of around 45 cents after paying $6 for the cereal. Her attorney states she has suffered injury due to the box being misbranded. The lawsuit reads, plaintiff continues to suffer harm because she cannot rely on the product's labeling, including the representations, for their truth, and thus is unable to determine whether she can purchase the products in the future. Post Consumer Brands has not publicly responded. A similar class action suit was filed earlier this month against Fruity Pebbles, another Post brand. You know, I can see this lawsuit from both sides. The first thing I would do if I were the honeycomb people is find out how large this woman's bowls are. Meanwhile, on the plaintiff's side, Honeycomb has been bragging about size in their commercials for over 50 years. So the onus is on them.
Honeycomb's big, yeah. It's not small, no. Honeycomb's got a big bite. Big taste in a big bite.
Parents in a Rockville, Maryland home used a magnet to check their children's Halloween haul for metal. They found some. Police then warned parents to inspect all candy. The media covered the story of gummy bears with needles in them. The public paid attention. The police investigated. Ultimately, there was a confession. Said police, the incident was a hoax carried out by a 9-year-old child within the household where the report originated. The child admitted to placing sewing needles in 2 packages of gummy bears. You know, sometimes children do exactly what their parents are begging them to do.
And the truth shall set you free!
Police in Port St. Lucie, Florida, responded to a report of shots fired in the parking lot of a closed pub at 2:48 a.m. Investigators say 44-year-old Peter Riera pulled a Glock pistol and shot at 2 different men and 1 woman in their 20s as they ran for their lives. All shots missed. The trio all knew each other, but not Riera. He was in the bar, and they got into an argument with him, said Sergeant Dominic Masidi. There was a conversation about how many, I kid you not, how many eggs a chicken can lay. And Riera said the men and woman were trying to con him. Witnesses did not back up that claim, and Riera was arrested on multiple felony charges. Well, sounds like he was just clucking mad. And finally, in this section of the Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, British students increasingly use American vocabulary in classrooms, according to a survey by the Times of London. More children are saying garbage instead of rubbish and candy instead of sweets. Other American terms taking hold include apartment for flat, closet for cupboard, and diaper for nappy. Teachers attribute this shift to YouTube, American streaming platforms, and influencers like Mr. Beast and Coco Melon. Parents have also noticed children using American expressions or adopting U.S. accents mid-sentence. Professor Lynn Murphy of the University of Sussex said that borrowing across English dialects isn't new and rarely permanent in children. The Guardian notes British phrases like gobsmacked and knickers in a twist are likewise gaining popularity in America. You know, this is something that irritates my lifelong manservant, Sir Dudley Piddly Haversham Sedgwick Smythe. Don't believe me? Just ask him. Sir Dudley, how do you feel about UK children adopting Americanisms?
Bollocks! I'm bloody knackered and gobsmacked. It's just a loquacious discombobulation, and it's not my cup of tea.
Oh, posh. You're just causing a storm in a teacup.
Oh, dear God. Remind me, why do I still work for you?
I'm guessing because I still have the negatives?
Carry on, sir.
Thought you'd see it my way. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Seth Voorhees is the author of a post-apocalyptic suspense novel called Immune. Seth joins us from Rapid City, South Dakota via Riverside.com. Hi, Seth.
Hi, how's it going?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
No problem.
This is a story that I understand deals with a deadly virus.
Yes, it's a pandemic narrative. It has a lot of twists and turns, has kind of a little bit of a zombie narrative with it as well. However, that's not the main theme of the story. For me, because when I wrote it, that was when Walking Dead was popular and, Fear of the Walking Dead. And so I didn't want to go totally in that direction. So I have it in the book where they come out of the zombie phase and they remember everything that society did to them. So there's a lot of clashes between the immune who didn't get infected because they were immune because of their blood type A positive, and then the inflicted, that's the group eventually developed after they come out of the zombie phase, and they just rebuild society, the inflicted do, and there's a lot of twists and turns in that regard. I kind of tell people it's kind of like the House of Cards towards at some point.
When did you start writing this novel? And the reason I ask the question is, did it have anything to do with the pandemic that we went through?
No, actually, I put in a lot of thought into it, but one of the original thoughts came from swine flu when that was going on, and I thought, how weird would it be if you were like a certain blood type and you were immune to it and you had to watch everyone else kind of suffer? How would that affect you? It was released in December of 2019, so actually 2 months right before COVID came, so it was really bad timing, actually. I can remember being at the gym after it was released, and there was a news report on, the bank of TVs that they have, and there was researchers talking about maybe thinking that a blood type had to do with COVID, and I was just sitting there going, man, that's freaky.
When you first heard about that and your book coming out, did you think it was, from your perspective, did you think it was bad timing, or did you think it might have been great timing?
That's a good question. I thought of it both ways, because I also remember there was another novel, it was a British novel, I believe, and he had written it. Can't remember the author now, but I remember he had a pandemic story about, wasn't it like London getting locked down, and he had a lot of success. So yeah, maybe just depending on the perspective. I think at the time a lot of people weren't really interested in wanting to read about a pandemic just because they were going through one, but it's on its second edition now, so hopefully maybe we can capture a little more attention now that the pandemic's kind of decreased and everyone goes, oh, okay, well, now I'm more interested in reading about it.
You describe yourself as a writer of dark fiction. Do you consider yourself a dark person?
No, not really. I'm actually very warm and very caring. I don't know where that started. In fact, I've worked currently with Lutheran Social Services, and I've worked in that field for a really long time. I've always worked with troubled youth, 10 to 19. I've always been helpful, helping other people. I can't tell you how that really got started. I think it had to do a lot with Goosebumps, for those who had that same type of childhood I did, where, you just kind of fell in love with those stories. And yeah, I don't know. I've always been drawn to it, even as a young man.
You mentioned earlier that this was a situation where there are the inflicted and there are the immune.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like this is a story where the hunted becomes, for lack of a better term, revengeful.
A little bit, yeah. There's a little back and forth between the sides gaining the advantage. First you have the inflicted, who aren't even called the inflicted. They're just the ones who are getting the virus and getting sick. And then they find out who's immune, and then the immune have to go through certain parts in the story where they are trying to, like they donate blood, and they do things to kind of help the inflicted, but the pandemic gets going too much. And then there's eventually society crumbles, and then, immune are kind of on top for a little bit. And then, like I said, a little bit of a zombie narrative comes back into the story, and then eventually the inflicted come out of the zombie phase, and then they take over and actually rebuild society and rebuild the government, and then it's the immune whose turn now to be kind of prosecuted. And so yeah, there's a lot of warring factions that just go back and forth. There's terrorist organizations that get formed who want to not have the inflicted in power anymore. I have one character who I really, even though she's a secondary character, I fell in love with her. Her name was Helen Olsen. She's actually a member. She winds up getting the virus, being part of the inflicted, but her partner Tamara is immune, and they spend a lot of the story going back and forth with those clashes as well. Like when one is going or when one is kind of got the upper hand, the one of them has to hide the other, and eventually Helen becomes the director of what will become the replacement for the CIA, while still having to hold or keeping Tamara a secret. So there's a lot of back and forth with that.
You mentioned that this secondary character is the one you fell in love with. Is that something that happens when you go through the writing process? You either fall in love or out of love with a particular character that you've created?
For me, it does. I don't know about other authors, but yeah, I have a tendency to really love all of the characters. Um, and so that book, Immune, was really my first, well, it was my second published novel, but it was the first novel that I actually wrote. And so I made the mistake of falling too in love with Helen and probably made her a little more interesting than Wyatt, who's the main character. And yeah, I had a great editor who's done professional editing his whole life, even for like New York editing services, and he even told me, he said, it's a great mistake for your first book, but don't do that too often, because yeah, people want to fall in love with the main character, but still both characters are great. But yeah, I fall in love with secondary characters all the time, and I think when you read a lot of great books, you have that as well. Anytime I read a story, I'm always like, I wish they had more of this character.
You earned a Bachelor of Science degree in sociology and psychology. So, how did you get into the writing field? And does any of your background educationally work its way into your stories?
Sometimes it does. I would say with Immune, maybe a little bit of the psychological aspect, maybe some social psychology definitely went in there. I would say more with the projects I have going on right now. I have two going on. I'd say even more with those two stories that I hope will get done here soon, hopefully in the next year or so. But yes, it does play a part. It does go in. I've always been, yeah, when I studied sociology, I loved theory and I loved how just all those avenues about society and just, what we do, just, yeah, as a class and all of that stuff. Yeah, I won't bore you with all the theories I love.
How did you come to being a writer?
So as I mentioned before, I went to loving the Goosebump books when I was young, and I loved them so much. I've always been a storyteller to begin with, even before I really got to the age where I could read. I always had an active imagination. And so after Goosebumps, reading those, I even sat down with a piece of paper and I wrote a bunch of titles to books, and I tried to write. I was young, probably, middle school and stuff, so I didn't get fully invested as I could have. And then my first short actual novel that I wrote was my senior year of high school. It was called The Chronicles of Clark. And that was the first novel I ever wrote. Now, I'll be honest with you, once I got out of college and I started down the career field, I took a little bit of a break with fiction writing, even though stories were always coming to me and, maybe I'd write here and there. But I really didn't take it really seriously until about 9 years ago. I'd say when I was 32, I believe. I'm 40 now, so yeah, 9 years. So I really picked it back up then, which was great and awesome. I think, just as you get older, you just want more interests and more things to do, and I picked it right back up, and I'm, thinking, geez, why did I ever stop doing this? I shouldn't have, and yeah, I just fell in love with it.
Do you consider yourself a full-time writer now?
I guess I would like to be full-time. Right now I'm kind of part-time, I guess, because I do have 2 full-time jobs. I'd love it to be full-time. I do write every day, and I do work on my books every day, so I guess I am full-time. I just don't get paid like a full-time author.
What are your daytime jobs?
So like I said, I work in the social work field. I also have maintenance job that I do there as well. I do building maintenance here and there with the weather. So lately it's been a lot of raking leaves. That's been the big thing.
Immune sounds like a great story that would make a cinematic feature, either that or maybe even a television show. Would you like to see your characters on either the big or small screen?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'd love it. I think it'd be great to have that happen. I think for sure and I left it very open to writing sequels as well, which is something I've been thinking about. But yeah, I'd love it to be either a movie or TV show. I think with like Helen, I was thinking of Emily Blunt would be a great actress. And then for Tamara, it'd be, I can't think of her last name, but it's Zoe. Sorry, I can't remember her last name off the top of my
Zoe
head.
Deschanel?
Yes, thank you. I was like, I knew it was something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I've already got the characters thought up and in my mind and who would play them and how it would work out. Yeah, I think it'd be a great TV show at least.
The press pitch says this is not your parents' apocalypse story. How different is it from what we grew up with?
Well, like I mentioned, I think, well, for one, the coming out of the zombie phase and remembering everything that happened to them and how society had treated them, and they get all their faculties back and being able to rebuild society in a, I wouldn't say a better image. They still are human and they get kind of caught up in, prejudice and revenge and all of that. But I think just getting past the normal pandemic narrative of just everyone dies, like that's most pandemic narratives, is you're just focusing more on the horrors of everyone dying, where I take it a step further and there's a lot of just building afterwards and what happens to the society and what happens. So what's interesting is the immune, the whole world gets involved, and eventually in the story Australia becomes the country, it becomes the home origin to all the immune gets sent there. And I don't want to give up too much of the story, but yeah, I definitely encompass the whole world in it, where it's all building together, where I think most narratives just focus on one country.
Well, congratulations on the book. It's called Immune. And Seth, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Seth Voorhees, author of the post-apocalyptic suspense novel Immune. You can go to our website at thestuffwall.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0848, and you'll find the link to Seth's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuffwall program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
Airport security can probably tell who is starting or ending their trip based on how the bag is packed when it goes through the X-ray.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestuffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestuffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
From our studios in Montreal, Canada, and going out to the rest of the world, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's time to crack a spine. The Stuff File presents Book Banter with Stuart Nulman. Once again, here's Peter Anthony Holder.
And once again, we have Stuart with us, and he's here to talk about candy, but not the fattening kind.
No, Peter, not the kind that will earn you frequent trips to the dentist. No. We're talking about the late, great John Candy on this edition of Book Banter, because, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the birth of one of the greatest comedic talents to emerge from Canada, and that's John Candy. Now, throughout his career, he has left a comedy legacy that is unforgettable, with his many characters on the cult classic series SCTV, like Johnny LaRue, Dr. Tongue, and Gil Fisher, also known as the Fish and Musician, not to mention memorable performances in such movies as Splash, Uncle Buck, Spaceballs, and of course Trains, Planes, and Automobiles. Now, sadly, John Candy left us way too soon when he succumbed to a massive heart attack on March 4th, 1994, on the Durango, Mexico set of what would be his final movie, Wagons East. He was only 43 years old. Now, in the 31 years since his untimely death, there has been a growing appreciation of John Candy both on and off screen. Back in September, a documentary that chronicled his life and career called John Candy, I Like Me debuted at the Toronto International Film Festival to enthusiastic critical acclaim, and can now be seen on Amazon Prime Plus. And now the perfect companion piece to this documentary is in the form of Paul Meyer's biography, John Candy, A Life in Comedy. Now, after reading this excellent book, 3 things come to mind about John Candy. First, comedy and John Candy was an organic pairing. A sports injury he suffered while in high school dashed any dreams of pursuing a career in pro football. But throughout his youth, he lived on a steady diet of Jackie Gleason, Jack Benny, Peter Sellers, Albert Brooks, TV sitcoms, and classic comedy movies. He developed a knack for comedy that became natural to him as he apprenticed at local Toronto theatre companies, Second City in both Toronto and Chicago, and SCTV before he hit the big screen. It also sharpened his comedy acumen as a writer, an improviser, and the ability to create memorable characters that no other actor or comedian could interpret. He also extended his own talent to his own radio show called Radio Candy, which was like the precursor to the podcast, an animated series called Camp Candy, and even his own production company where he not only worked on his radio shows but also dabbled in directing prior to his death. Second, he was a caring and gentle soul who looked after the people around him, both in front and behind the camera. His family, friends, and colleagues always regarded him as a wonderful human being. He was a bon vivant with a lust for life who could command a room as the center of attention for hours on end. Yet he had both heart and soul and practiced it frequently. This could be, whether it be, giving roles to his SCTV castmates in his movies, or providing the crew members of the films he was working on with hot coffee or extra food, which he paid out of his own pocket. Or one great example was during the production of his first dramatic feature, Only the Lonely, in 1991, when he selflessly gave the large trailer that was issued to him to his co-star, Hollywood legend Maureen O'Hara, and settled in her smaller trailer. And third, like any comedian, or any crop of comedians, Candy carried a lot of personal baggage, especially when it came to his mortality. His father died of a heart attack at the young age of 35 when John was only 5 years old. That premature death haunted Candy for the rest of his life. He became almost obsessed with his own mortality and a seesaw quest to improve his weight and body image via the Pritikin diet program. But all in all, Myers tells these sides to the life of John Candy with a great deal of diligent journalistic legwork, whether it be digging up media interviews Candy conducted, or conducting numerous interviews with his family and contemporaries such as Andrea Martin, Catherine O'Hara, Eugene Levy, Tom Hanks, and Steve Martin. The end result is an all-encompassing portrait of one of the greatest comedians that Canada ever produced, and the more we learn about him from Paul Myers' book makes us appreciate John Candy and his talents even more, and painfully miss him as a beautiful soul just as much.
I understand when it came to making the book and also writing the book and also making the documentary, uh, people went high and low to find some dirt on John Candy, and it just doesn't exist.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and that's very prevalent when you read this book. That it's nothing but good things about him. I mean, yes, he had his issues and his baggage, but who doesn't? But even when he was working on Wagons East and he wasn't in the best of health, he made sure that he stuck around and finished what he had to do before he went home. He was a trooper, also. Yeah, you have to admit that.
Also, didn't his father died when he was 5 years old?
Yeah.
Isn't that the same thing that happened to his son?
No, his son is still around. Oh, right, when his son was 5.
Yeah, his son was 5 when John Candy died.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's right, because his son was born in 1989.
Though one thing that I've always found, and I don't know if it's in the book or I don't know if it's in the documentary, but the one thing that I've always enjoyed about him was the fact that, again, his humanity.
Yeah.
There's a story that Macaulay Culkin often tells about when they were working together in Uncle Buck.
Oh, yeah.
As you know, Kit Culkin, the less said about him, the better. That's the father of all the Culkins, right?
Yeah.
And when he was on the set, Kit was, John Candy would kind of shield Macaulay from his dad because he realized what a bad influence his dad was. So he was really looking out for this child actor when quite frankly, a lot of people don't look out for child actors, especially when they work with them.
Yeah, no, I guess because he lacked a father, uh, John lacked a father. I guess he started becoming a father figure to a lot of other people. And I guess the example of Macaulay Culkin is a perfect one.
So the book again is?
It's called John Candy: A Life in Comedy by Paul Myers. It's published by the House of Anansi Press, and it's $34.95.
And what other books in this particular genre do you recommend?
Well, if you want to read a little bit more, Toronto journalist Martin Nulman, who's written books about other comedians, like he wrote about Mike Myers, he wrote the first full-length biography of Candy called "Laughing on the Outside," which was published shortly after Candy's death. And speaking of SCTV and the wonderful TV series it was and the cult status it had, Dave Thomas, who was a former member of the troupe, wrote a great history about the show, coffee table book called simply SCTV.
So again, this week's book is?
John Candy: A Life in Comedy by Paul Myers. It's published by House of Anansi Press, and it's $34.95.
And how can one find you, sir? I'm assuming it's not at the candy aisle.
No, and it's not on the road to Chicago with Del Griffith and Neil Page, that's for sure, in a burnt-out car. No. You could find me in my blog, Stuart Nulman's Grapevine.wordpress.com, in the pages of the Montreal Times at www.mtltimes.ca, or on Substack. I got my own semi-regular page on there, and you can read some articles there as well.
And I can concur, it's a great read. Thank you very much, Stuart.
Well, thank you, Peter, and just remember, I'm, a Mog, half man, half dog. I'm my own best friend.
Stuart Nulman with another edition of Book Banter here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
The Stuff File.
And we're just about a racetrack for this edition of the Stuff File program. We do have an idiot of the day, but I've got one more Stuff File news story to share with you right here, right now. And this next story is maliciously malevolent. Strike 3 Holdings has filed over 20,000 federal lawsuits since 2017, making the Delaware company America's most prolific copyright plaintiff. The studio owns rights to approximately 2,000 adult films, mostly from Vixen Media Group, and using proprietary software to track down IP addresses allegedly downloading its content. Strike 3 sues John Doe's and subpoenas internet providers to identify real users. Most defendants settle for thousands of dollars to avoid public exposure, with five-figure settlements common. Defense attorneys and judges have compared the process to extortion. Legal experts estimate annual settlements could reach $20 to $30 million. Wow. None of Strike 3's cases have reached trial, leaving evidence-gathering methods unchallenged. Gee, it's starting to feel like this company makes more money making claims than making porn. Virtually or literally, either way, their customers are getting screwed. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff Out presents the Idiot of the Day.
A Florida woman was recently arrested after identifying herself as a suspected thief in a post online. 19-year-old Bryn Gifford is accused of fraudulent use of personal identification information of a person 60 years of age or older, fraudulent use of a credit card more than 2 times in 6 months, and petty theft. On August the 9th, deputies began a fraud investigation based on an incident that occurred at Palm Nails, a nail salon in Palm Coast, near Jacksonville. The victim visited the salon on August the 6th and 3 days later realized she no longer had her credit card in her possession. Then, when she eventually checked her card activity, she found 10 fraudulent charges had been placed between August the 6th and August the 9th, with over $500 in purchases at stores and restaurants. A detective obtained surveillance footage from various stores where the victim's card was used. Authorities considered their suspect to be a white woman with long dark hair and who was wearing a white camouflage jacket. Otherwise, however, investigators had little to go on. But on September 23rd, the sheriff's office posted an attempt to identify request on Facebook featuring a low-resolution photo of the woman wearing a white hoodie. Gifford herself reached out about the post. Detectives met with Gifford. Initially, Gifford said she had not done anything wrong. However, when detectives showed Gifford images of the suspect taken from the surveillance footage, one of which showed the suspect in Walmart's using the credit card to purchase items, she acknowledged that it was her in the photographs. Gifford was later found to have been employed at Palm Nails as a receptionist at the time that the victim's credit card was stolen. On October 16th, Gifford was arrested and booked into the Volusia County Correctional Facility in Daytona Beach. Now, why? Oh, why? When police put out a Facebook post asking people to identify a grainy photo, and you know that you've committed a crime, would you then call police to ask about said grainy photo? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0848. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0848. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. We leave you with this scientific quandary. If, as Einstein said, space and time are the same, then can you be 5 miles late?